Hey guys, what's up? It is Friday. Thank God it's Friday, TGIF. It is October 24th, 2025. It is 8:35 a.m. and it is a crisp but cloudy and foggy 52 degrees outside. And we are indeed a week away from Halloween, which means we are indeed a week away from the even though it feels like it's already started, and I'll talk about that later in another topic video or video subject, however you look at it. But even though it feels like it's doing it already, next week I look at it as the official pre-start to the holiday season. You know, the real pre-start. But anyway, with that said, before we get into the topic here of what I'm gonna talk about and discuss, I would like to ask you guys to do me a great favor if you could. It would really help me out, and that's subscribe to the channel, ring the bell for notifications, like the video, share the video, and also click on the link in the description. You can find my content elsewhere outside of YouTube, and in fact, you can find me at some of your various favorite podcast outlets like iTunes, iHeartRadio, Pandora, Spotify, Amazon Music, Audible, Radio Public, and even to an extent, SiriusXM. Basically, anywhere there's an audio and video podcast to be found, more than likely you'll find mine there as well. You can also support me by going over to my other video outlets like rumble.com, odyssey.com, and vimeo.com, including Dailymotion as well. Basically, two out of those four, that being Rumble and Vimeo, you can actually check out and enjoy probably more than the other two. Not saying that the other two haven't done me well, they have, but you know the catch though when it comes to Vimeo and Rumble is you can get away with just a little bit more. Basically, what would basically be like a limitation here on here on YouTube, I should say, through monetization, or maybe you could get your channel in trouble. Well, basically, you could get away with mostly get away with on outlets like Vimeo and Rumble.com. So I honestly ask you I ask you kindly and honestly kindly ask you to check those out, along with Odyssey and Dailymotion. You can also find me at deviantart.com at BVW1979, inkbuddy.net at BWRoses. You can find me in those areas as well. You can also support me over at patreon.com at BWRoses. I do have plans for that Patreon, and when those plans are finalized, I'm very close to doing that. I will let you in on what those are. Also, you can support me over at Cash App and Venmo if you'd like to donate there, if you'd like. Also, you can find me at my two stores. My new one being the Fourth Wall store. Only got one item there right now, but I'm planning on putting some more stuff there very soon in the near future. When that happens, believe me, I will let you know. But yeah, you got the Fourth Wall store. Has one bit of item there, but I think you'll like it. And then go to the bottom, and the link's at the top. And then you go to the bottom, I have a link or two to my Teespring store, and you can check out a lot of merchandise there that you can't get anywhere else. So check those out, it'd be greatly appreciated. Also, guys, during the video premiere here, you can say hi in the live chat and give your thoughts in the live chat on what I'm about to say and what I'm about to talk about. As well as if you feel like it, you can donate in the super chats via the live chat. That'd be greatly appreciated as well. And if you don't, get in time to listen to this, as it's premiering, then afterwards, super thanks will be open as well after the premiere of this video if you didn't make it in time for the premiere to take part in this live chat and potential super chats. Again, super thanks will be open if you didn't make it on time, and if you want to donate that way, that'd be greatly appreciated as well if you can. And also, comments will be open after and during the premiere, so you have both the live chat and the comment section to give your thoughts in as well. But with that said, let's talk about something that really just, obviously has been making the rounds lately, because the way this started, from my point of view, the way this started is recently IDW released the 30th anniversary special issue of the Chaotix. Basically a one-off of the IDW Sonic series. And again, it was to celebrate the 30th anniversary of the Chaotix. The Chaotix debuted back in 1995, 1994. Mostly 1995 as part of the Knuckles and Chaotix video game. And I think around a little around the same time later, I should say, they made a debut in the comics. Correct me if I'm wrong. But anyway, IDW decided to put out, Ian Flynn and his team at IDW, because he also worked on other projects as well. They decided to put out the 30th anniversary for the Chaotix. And what made this a noteworthy anniversary issue is the fact that at the end of one of the stories, there is a background character. Now you might say, well, what's important about a background character? Well, this background character actually happened to have a very familiar, a little bit different, but very familiar design to them when you look at them from the back. Now, you didn't see their face. You didn't, see the face, and I think that was done intentionally. I think and believe that was done intentionally, but you saw their back. And when people saw this character just from the back, the first and rightful, thoughts were, can it, the first and rightful thoughts were, can it be? Those were the first thoughts. Those were the first questions as well was, could it be? Could this be who we think it is? And after kind of looking over certain parts of the design, from the back, like the hair, the proportions, believe it or not, of the body, what they were wearing, and then using some editing tools, people came up with the conclusion that they felt was the justified one in the beginning, or that justified their, the thoughts and the questions, the intrigue, the speculation from the beginning, that this character with the back turned intentionally, no facial, not looking at the face or anything, but the back is turned, that this character was none other than Princess Sally. That's right, Sally Acorn from Archie Sonic and Sonic Satayam. And a lot of people were thrilled, because, they see this character, they see the similar design, and they're like, and again, the first thoughts and questions in the mind are, wait a minute, is that who I think it is? Could it be? And then, of course, being dedicated fans for the longest time, they decipher all these different things, and they're like, oh my gosh, it is. It is her. Now, some people will come out and have come out and said, oh, you guys are making a big deal about nothing. That's not really her. It's just a background character they just put in there. But yet you have fans, kind of debating that. You have fans debating, that it's just another character by pointing out, similarities, comparing the similarities and everything from the post-Archie design to what we see now. And even those that, would basically tell them, oh, it's just a regular background character they just added in there, even those people are like, you actually do have a point. That might be who you say it is. And what's interesting about this is probably one of the biggest cameos, even though the back was turned, and I think if it's who, and I think and believe it, if it is who a lot of fans feel it is, and honestly right now when I look at it, I'm like, yeah, I think you're correct, I think you're spot on. I believe that the reason the character's back was, or the character had their back to us intentionally, is because that was Ian Flynn's call. Ian Flynn is the top guy, right? He's the guy that has the final say sometimes, right? When it comes to the comic. So honestly, him knowing that fans want to have these characters from Archie Comics, Archie Sonic and Sonic Satayam back in the comics of IDW, or back in the comics, and more specifically in the comics of IDW, obviously he knows, being a long-time fan himself, he knows what he's doing. He knows what he's doing, and what he's doing here, specifically, what he's doing here is he's throwing out little clues, he's throwing out little hints here and there as to, not only letting fans know, hey, I get you, I hear you, I want to bring them back to you, and so here, I'm going to have my artist add in little Easter eggs. Excuse me. And he's been doing this since the beginning of the IDW book. Remember, when they did the first story, which was a Sonic Forces tie-in, you had that one panel with Rouge communicating, I believe, with Amy, in the foreground. Not the foreground. I would say in the background on the right side of Rouge, you saw this board. You saw this car. You saw this board, right? And on that board, was a bunch of notes, but also some pictures. And two pictures was that of Bunny and Sally. But basically, Bunny and Sally in the pre-reboot designs. And then if that's not enough, you had an artist come out and say that the two characters in the background that were holding each other and kind of protecting and shielding each other from what was going on in one of the more recent IDW Sonic issues, that them in that pose was basically was a reference to the same pose, the same protection shielding pose that Bunny and Antoine had with each other in Archie Sonic. So obviously Ian Flynn is given the okay, if not even suggesting, to do this so that he at least lets the fans know, hey, I hear you, and I'm doing what I can to get them in there, and this is how I'm doing it. Because, what he's doing is basically, I think, taking his time, even though the comic in 2.5 years is going to be a decade old, believe it or not, if it makes it that far, because again, everybody's talking about IDW's situation financially behind the scenes, but I've already talked about that, and that's another story if I want to do another video on that for another day. But point is basically, Ian Flynn is using every opportunity he has to, give the fans acknowledgement that he hears them, he hears them, he understands them, and that he himself wants to get the characters in there, but it's just not going to be as easy as, okay, put them in there, now we can go back to the status quo. No, it's going to take time. It's going to take a lot of time. So he's doing what he has to do to kind of slowly integrate them. And in fact, a lot of fans looked at this cameo of Sally, with her back intentionally, in my opinion, turned so we wouldn't get a full-on look at what she looked like. But basically, a lot of fans are hoping that this becomes another Lanolin situation. Because remember, Lanolin was just like a very minor, kind of in the background and sort of minor side character for a bit before they slowly decided to integrate her into the story, into the comic full time as a part of the Neo Diamond Cutters, basically make her more of an active player in the story. And whether you like her or not, she actually turned out to be very popular. It's true. She turned out to be very popular, and basically, yeah, fans got on her, for making some stupid decisions. It's the same way fans got on Sally in Archie Comics for the way she was written. Same here with Lanolin. But the thing is, like I said, she went on to become very popular. Fans still, talk about her. They still want to see her. And mostly they want to see her redemption, if you know what I mean. But anyway, I bring her up because, again, like I said, she started out as a minor background to side character and all that, and then she was slowly integrated into being a player in the comic. And what's interesting is when she first started to get into that role of being more of a main player, mostly with the Neo Diamond Cutters and everything, a lot of people felt that her approach of let's take care of the job first, let's take care of the mission first, and all that, and not, get sidetracked, not, take this lightly, let's get serious. A lot of people said, and even commented, and even I believe I commented as well, that it reminded them, her personality in that manner, reminded them of Sally's. It reminded them of Sally's. And then you have that one shot with Sonic holding her hand as he's talking to her, and it definitely, in a lot of folks' minds, gave off, some very Sonic, very Sonsal, S-O-N-S-A-L, S-O-N-S-A-L, that's what it is, Sonsal, S-O-N-S-A-L, Sonic Sally, if you will, vibes, by that one moment. So that's so basically a lot of fans are hoping that this time around, that not only is this the character that pretty much no one said anything yet, no one, in the comic, well, that works on the comic, I should say, no one that works on the comic has come out and said otherwise yet. But if this isn't, so basically that's good news for a lot of fans, because if this is basically who they believe it is, then they're hoping for a similar situation down the line, to we'll see more of this character pop up in the background and maybe become more involved and then maybe we'll start seeing what they look like. And if they have a familiar facial structure or design, then it's pretty much a dead-on clue, right in front of us that this is definitely who it is, and we're slowly getting them integrated into the book. How they're going to be, personality-wise, whether they have any kind of royal connections or they're just being presented differently. That's going to be up to how they bring them in. But the reason I say this and everything, the reason I say this, and I'm about 15 minutes and 35 seconds in, is what's interesting is, and maybe I find it kind of ironic, if you will. Maybe I find it kind of ironic, but what's interesting about this is it got people talking about something that, I've given my thoughts on about, and personally I've let it be known I'm not fond of it, and believe it or not, a lot of people are not fond of it. But basically, this brought up the whole Mecha Sally situation. Yeah, it brought up the whole Mecha Sally story. But more specifically, it brought up something that I believe I've talked about before. And that is the whole Sally being weaponized. That's right. You see, some people were recently asking the question of whether or not, because it has gone on record that, even in the cartoon, Sir Charles, Uncle Chuck, Sonic's uncle, makes it known that even when they're roboticized, they know everything. They see everything. They just can't do anything about it. So in other words, when he's told, like at the end of the Ultrasonic episode where he debuted in season 1, him basically turning back and all that, that was basically an example of he couldn't control it. Like basically, the roboticized, like mentally, like let's say in an astral plane, the roboticized side of him put him back in his cage, or put him back in his prison cell, to where like Chuck got out and was able to take control, but the roboticized side of him, basically regained their strength, shoved him back in the cell, locked him up, and took control again. That's basically how, that's basically, I guess you could say, the best example of what happened, if you will, and how to kind of, how to simplify, as crazy as it sounds, what he tells Sonic in Sonic Conversion, which is his second appearance and the first one he has being de-roboticized. Because part of that story, mostly even with the first episode, Game Guide, the season 2 premiere, was to, the main portions of those two stories, I should say. And I think we even got hints of it in season 1, if you will, with Ultrasonic, as well as some other episodes. But basically, the premise of those first two episodes of season 2 was the freedom fighters had these intentions. Sally, had this plan and everything to create a de-roboticizer, so that way anybody that they would, bring back to Knothole, even in a roboticized state, that they would free temporarily with the help of a power ring, they'd be able to get into the de-roboticizer and basically get them back to normal. But that was the intention, and obviously they had plans to do more with it in the following season, and maybe Team Season will capitalize on that when they go further, and they will go further with their thing, believe me. But it's just one of those one of those moments to where basically it's basically one of those moments in the cartoon, and then we kind of slowly get it acknowledged in the comics, to where the characters are aware of what's going on, they just can't control their actions. It's basically, like I said, it is the roboticized part of them that's, basically putting them back in their cell and saying, hey, we're locking you up. And a good example of this, I think was, what was it, season 2 or season 1, around one of the later seasons, we had this appearance by Carol Danvers. But she was in a coma and everything in the original X-Men animated series. And we find out that her mind, her powers and even her mind is stuck within Rogue. Her life is stuck within Rogue, because out of all the characters that Rogue has absorbed the powers of, she would also absorb the memories, right? The thoughts, the memories, everything. Well, basically, Rogue, in a flashback, because we got the flashback of how she got her powers, basically touched Carol Danvers, and basically she was draining her powers, and she noticed that something was wrong here. It's like something wasn't right, and she wanted to let go. And her mom, Mystique, or at least her stepmom, if you will, or adoptive mom, told her, "Don't let go. Don't remove your hands." Because she wanted to. Because basically, obviously, in the flashback, Miss Marvel, Captain Marvel now, was always a thorn in Mystique and her crew's side, or at least one of them. So she needed something to, basically take her out for good, and that's what happened here. And Rogue didn't like it. Rogue did not care for what was happening here, because it's like, okay, still a little bit of energy here, still a little bit of energy there. That's fine, but not basically steal their life. Take everything away from them, and that's what Rogue unintentionally did. That's what she unintentionally did, and everything. And then we see in the episode mentally what's going on. It's like a battle in the astral plane of her mind. She's basically what we get the idea of is she's sealing up all these memories, if you will, but mostly something like Carol Danvers mentally, she's she's sealing them up and everything, so that way basically nothing nothing can interfere with her life, nothing can disrupt her life. And this was something that had slowly been, I did, mentally been breaking free to, get control, get her life back. I mean, there's even a moment where basically she fully takes on, or she causes, because basically Rogue also touches Mystique's powers, right? Mystique's a shapeshifter, and by doing so, was basically like the last thing the Carol Danvers personality in her mind needed to basically temporarily take over Rogue's body, basically wipe her, put her in the same situation, that she was in, if you will. And and it was just, it was just a great episode and all that. But to me, I bring that up because that's exactly what is, that was exactly the clue. That was exactly like the information, even in the cartoon and later in the comics, that gave us the idea of, oh, they're aware of what they're doing. They just can't do anything. They just can't stop themselves. Like it's basically like Lupe. Lupe in the comics allowed herself to be roboticized to save her family, but she was a strong enough character to where she was able to fight off. She was able to fight off the control temporarily before succumbing to it. In other words, she was able to fight it off enough, to get her pack out of there. But she succumbed to it too much to the point that basically, as I mentioned earlier, the roboticized portion of her in her mind had basically caught up to her and sealed her into a prison. That's what that's what happened, in my opinion. Again, going back to that X-Men episode that I mentioned. But getting back on point, a lot of people brought this whole Mecha Sally thing up, not to, I think mainly because of what, they saw cameo-wise in the IDW anniversary book with Chaotix. They brought this up because they were wondering if she was aware. If she was aware and everything of what was going on. And one could assume she was. One could assume she was aware. As a matter of fact, some people even pointed out a comic, and I think it's by Glitcher, or at least it's somebody else did it as well, or someone did something similar, to where Eggman basically, it was an extension of what we saw at the end of one of the issues, where Eggman is looking at Sally, has Sally in her roboticized form just propped up, and he's like measuring certain parts of her, like, okay, and he's saying things like, ah, yes, this will do that, so oh yes, that going there will be great, ah, yes, and all. He's basically figuring out what he can do to make her into his ultimate weapon, or at least one of them. And what happens basically is the last thing we see in that official panel is him putting a blowtorch to her face. They basically indicating he's going to take her apart. And there are several comics on DeviantArt, several web comics on DeviantArt and across the web, one by Glitcher, and I think another one, I can't think of the name of the person behind it, that basically extends that episode, or extends that situation to the point that not only does he take her apart gruesomely, basically takes her apart and all that, but he has Snively burn her original parts. Basically, put them in the incinerator and melt them down. Melt them down into scrap or extra liquid metal that they need. I looked at that when I saw it. And I was like, yeah, this is a little darker than I think Archie would allow. Archie Comics would allow, because basically, again, he has Snively burn her now dismembered parts. So there's no way of, potential derobotization, or at least you would think. Another comic that, falls similarly in the same situation, I don't know if it's the same one, someone indicated that basically it was, basically that in one of these extended alternate takes of the scene, Eggman had Sally's brain, oh, not brain, but had her head, because again, he had to basically dismember her to do the weaponized upgrade. Basically, somebody said in one of the panels he had Sally's head connected to some wires, to see her brain pattern, to see how much, for his enjoyment, to see how much he was hurting her and everything, much to his enjoyment. And when he saw he saw how much hurt she was going through, sadistically, it made him more happy, or something to that extent. Again, it could have been, the same comic. It could have been one different, but it's just one of those situations to where, again, it definitely, even from a fan's perspective, a fan's interpretation and continuation of a certain scene, it definitely backs up what we found out. It definitely backs up what we found out in the cartoon and then later on in the comic officially. But yeah, the question is, did she feel? Did she know what was happening? And look, the way Sally was always presented, of course she knew. Of course she obviously knew. And the fans' darker take, some of these fans' darker extended take on it, I definitely believe, I definitely believe that the writers behind the official book would agree that, yeah, that's basically what, not only basically are you showing what, what happened or what happened during the process, but yeah, I'm sure Ian Flynn and all of them would agree with that and say, yeah, she definitely knew what was happening, but she just couldn't do nothing about it. But then that brings up the question, it's like, well, if she has this design, she has this weaponized design, wouldn't that prevent derobotization from happening? Well, you would think it would prevent it, but here's what's interesting. Robotnik basically created, her weaponized body, and he added in, as some fans put it, in their continuation of the original pre-reboot of the Archie comic, he basically put in some kind of, installation, around where the power ring would be. Now, the comic made it sound like he had modified a power ring as well, to prevent any free will from being, established or reconnected, if you will. But I still believe she had a little bit of that coming through because, again, there's an issue where she sent off to the village where Elias and his family's at, her brother Elias, to hunt him down and take him out. But she doesn't get to him in time, and she's just staring out of the window, and it's almost like you could see a little bit of that free will sneak in a little bit, like she's saddened at the fact, because she even says in a monotone way, but not like a very robotic, like target escape, target out of range, deep 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 deep. No, she doesn't do it like that. Instead, the way she makes it sound is she's like target target nowhere to be found, or target escaped. The way she makes it sound, basically to me, was like the first hint that Ian Flynn put in there that she was going to get her free will back. And if any of these, ideas and clues that fans went off of, in their own fan interpretations, were going to be reality officially, then I think by at least, I would say 248, had things gone the way they should have, and there was no lawsuits, had things gone the way they were originally supposed to go, and like I said, there was no lawsuits, and maybe the Mega Man crossover would have been held off until the story was done, or even given its own limited series, if you will. I think come 248, 249 officially, she would have got her free will back. They would have saw exactly what happened. They would either find out that, yeah, he did put some, insulation to prevent the power ring's full effect to give her back her free will, or they would notice, oh, wait a minute, he put a power ring in her that he modified. And that's why she's not getting her free will. So obviously they would either replace it and give her a real power ring that would give her back her free will, or they would take out the insulation so that not only does the power ring power back up, but she gets her free will back, and basically apologizes for her actions, even sheds tears, I guess oily tears or whatever you want to call them. Well, they could be real tears, who knows? but anyway, lets him in on what's going. But also, like I said, apologizes for her actions and lets him in on what's going on. Just lets him know that, yeah, he wants to rewrite reality because to him, and I could see them doing them. I could have seen them doing a moment like this in the official book, in the official Archie book, where she could have told Sonic that, Sonic and Tails and even the Arctic Freedom Fighters, that basically the plan that he had, that Eggman has, is to rewrite history and the world, once again, because you are always because you to him are a constant of chaos. And for Sonic, and to me, I think what would happen is Sonic would hear this if they were to do this, if they would have done this, I should say, in the official book, had, like I said, nothing happened behind the scenes to change stuff and rush certain things and all that. I believe Sonic's reaction is, once that would happen, because I truly believe this is the moment I think he wanted to get to, at least, before all the stuff behind the scenes happened. I think Sonic's reaction would be like, wait a minute, he wants to rewrite everything because he thinks he says I'm a constant of chaos. And it might take him a bit, or might even be Tails that comes up with, the answer of being like, oh, I think I know what she means. Basically, to Eggman, you're unpredictable. He doesn't know how to plan for you, so he's trying to rewrite things in his image so that he can plan for you, or that he basically gets you out of the way permanently. So I could honestly believe, that we would have seen something like that happen in the official books had nothing happened behind the scenes. But the point is, they brought up the question of how was she going to be deroboticized if he did all this, like he weaponized her and all that. Well, let's be honest, we've honestly seen characters go through this kind of stuff before, not just in comics but in animation, to where once they get restored, they're fine, they're back to normal. That nothing really happened. Like it's like nothing's changed. I did a reply video about a week ago, so to Bob Equestria, Josh Scorcher's review of the first MLP G1 specials that kind of kicked things off, kickstarted things off, I should say, for the whole franchise. And basically one of the things Josh talked about in that review, and I replied about it, is that you had four G1 ponies, including the G1 version of Applejack later on, get turned into dragons, right? They got turned into monstrous, mindless dragons whose only role in their existence was to obey the original Tyrek, if you know what I mean. So basically, long story short, they had no control of what they were doing. But once Tyrek got defeated, they got restored, right? They got restored. They were back to normal. Like nothing happened. They were fine. They were absolutely fine. And again, we've seen this, throughout all kinds of different media, animation and comic book media. We've seen this. Now, there have been exceptions too, to where when something happens to a character, that basically, even if they get restored, that little addition is left over, even if it's not touched upon ever again. It's kind of like, again, going back to MLP, but this time with Friendship is Magic. There's the episode, I think it's season 2 or 3 or one of them, where, is it season 4? I don't know, what is it, season 4, I believe? I think it's season 4, where basically Fluttershy becomes Flutterbat. She basically becomes a fruit bat, if you will, a very vampirus, if you will. So she becomes that way, and even though she's restored to normal thanks to a combined, unity of magic, of a magic spell that Rarity, that Twilight and Rarity used to help her. She still has, at the end, it's hinted at, she still has a little bit of that fruit bat in her, with like a little fang sticking out, sticking out of her, not sticking out, but as a part of her teeth. It's part of her teeth now. So so even though it's not touched upon after that, even and everything, it's not touched upon after that, and everything, except for her disguising herself with the Flutter Bat in Scaremaster to prove that, hey, she can take part in Nightmare Night and everything, their version of Halloween. Outside of the initial debut of her Flutterbat persona, and everything, we don't see anything touched upon about the Fang. It's just like a little Easter egg, like a little hint saying, yep, she's still got a part of that Flutterbat in her, but that's it. We're not going to touch upon it after that. And again, I bring that up because sometimes these kind of changes to a character can be integrated into the restoration. And that's obviously what Ian Flynn had planned. Because a lot of people pointed out that back in 2011, believe it or not, and that's how it's listed, because these were the WIPs, become 2011 and 2012, because it really got more noted in 2012 exactly what was going to happen in 2013. I believe. I think that was the year. Hold on for a sec, guys. Let me check. All right, sorry about that. It's actually 2014. I guess the idea is to redesign it. We're going back as far as 2011. I guess. I don't know. But I think I might have to correct some people on that. It wasn't 2011. It was actually more like late 2012 into 2013 that these new designs started to come into play. Because again, we didn't see the new design debut until about 2014 at the end of issue 257 in the last page. But the point I'm getting at is that there have been stories and all that in animation, comics, and even live action, to where when a character goes through a change, even if they're mind controlled or whatever, or robotic, or turned into something or whatever, that when they get restored, part of that change, some part of that change remains with them. Ian Flynn's idea with Sally here was, after she gets de-roboticized, her weaponized form would now be her new default design. In other words, the blue that's on top of her, the upper part of her that's blue, that would be her vest, but now zipped up with a black little tank top, in the middle. Her arms, her ring blades would now be her new gloves, and the ring blades would be, basically now little blue rings that you could just power up like that, or something to that extent. The bottom half of her would now be shorts and everything, or something to that extent as well. There was various notable, when you looked at the redesign for the first time and you look at it in the post reboot, it's like you could see exactly what Ian Flynn was doing, like what parts of Sally when she was de-roboticized were going to be kept over from the robotization, from the weaponization, if you will. And the same goes with other characters like Bunny. Bunny, the story with her going back to her uncle to get legionized so she can get her cybernetic parts back because she felt useless without him. We see a silhouette of her at the end of the Mighty and Ray Sonic Universe story, and it's basically indicated that she did get legionized, but she also had a little bit of a redesign, like she had her tufts, her cheek tufts, like Sally's, removed, so she can, basically, so that she could basically go back undetected, like she can go back to her friends undetected, but maybe with a new outlook, maybe a new makeover, if you will. And then with Antoine and Rotor, obviously they were gonna probably do stuff with them to give them their new looks, as well. But unfortunately, as I mentioned earlier, lawsuit came into being, and what are you gonna do? What are you gonna do? But yeah, honestly, going back to Sally, and her weaponized design, there's no doubt. There's no doubt she knew what was going on. And had things gone originally as they were meant to be, I think, and I've always stuck with this, I always believe that had they gone with what was originally planned, no interference behind the scenes or anything, that I think honestly, not only would she have been de-roboticized and given the new look that she would get in the post reboot, even if she had to adopt it herself to basically be like, hey, I'm gonna, I'm gonna give myself a makeover, and I'm gonna step into the light as if I'm reborn, with a new lease on life or whatever. That could have been a direction. That could have been something they would have done as well. But I think honestly, had like I said, nothing happened behind the scenes, legally, that or legally or lawsuit wise or whatever, had nothing happened behind the scenes, no interference, like I said, then not only do I think things would have gone the way they were supposed to go, but I think either her de-robotization would have led to the design that we would get, or they would have done a side story or something like that to where she would adopt this new look as sort of like a new lease on life. Like now, like basically what happened to her, the roboticization, the weaponization, was the end of her old self, and now she wants to adopt this new side of her, this new look for herself, to begin her next chapter, her next journey in life. And I also believe too that, she, yeah, she would have been affected mentally, because if there's one thing I will say about the fan comics, especially let's say with Archie Sonic Online, is they definitely do a good job adapting how she would react. Her going into this PTSD kind of like situation, just like she did when she thought Sonic was dead in the official comic for a year. She went into this PTSD deal to where she'd had to, seek therapy from Dr. Quack, and even when Sonic came back, she was in denial of admitting that, yeah, she thought he was dead, because, she would actually say, no, I actually thought you was, I always knew you were going to come back to me, kind of lying through her teeth about it. But the thing is, the Archie Sonic Online book, and I even think the Forever books, mostly Archie Sonic Online, I definitely feel did a great job tackling her situation, her trauma. Archie Sonic Forever, yeah, they got her back to normal, but almost instantly they kind of got her back on the field. Like she did regret, she did apologize, but they basically had to get back on the field. Like, basically she realized that now I got to fix what I helped make Eggman destroy, that. So, again, I like that, I like these interpretations and everything, because I think honestly one of the two, if not a hybrid of them, would have been exactly what we would have seen in the official book. I really do. And I think, she would have had some PTSD, even though she would give herself a new look, to give herself a new out lease on life and everything. But I truly believe she would have wanted to get payback on Eggman, like basically damage him so much, not kill him, but basically damage him so much to the point that it would take him a very, very long time to even get back on his feet. And I think honestly that would have been the goal in the long run, going into something like, let's say, 275 or issue 300. Had things gone originally as planned. That's just my opinion. That's just my opinion. And they still could have done that in the post reboot, because I think they were setting up for something big. Going into 300, starting with the Sonic Universe Freedom Fighters story, where you had the Freedom Fighter characters teaming up with established Sonic characters, from the games, to, not only go on missions, but make some startling discoveries. So I could see them still going through with something big, something that would damage Eggman for a long, long time, with issue 300, because again, it seemed like they were building something towards that with the help of the Sonic Universe books, as well as what they were going to do incorporating what they had planned for the latter books leading up to it, in my opinion. But overall, when it comes to the Mecha Sally design and everything, yeah, I have no doubt she did know what was going on. She did know what was going on, but again, you kind of knew she was going to get restored, because why would Eggman want to try to prevent her free will from coming through if basically he basically took her identity away from her the way he did? Why would he be so fearful to want to put some isolation inside of her where the power ring would be, or even slightly modify a power ring to prevent the free will from coming through? He wouldn't have done that unless he knew, hey, if this girl gets her free will, I'm screwed. Because even in her mechanized, roboticized form, she'll want to, she along with Sonic will want to take me out. So, honestly, he knew there was a good chance she'd be restored and everything. basically deroboticized, maybe with a new look or something like that, or maybe even an old look. Because that could happen too. Like to where she'd get deroboticized, she'd get her old look back, but then she'd basically adopt a new look to be like, this is my new outlook on life, if you will. And I think that's what would have happened. I really do. I think that's what would have happened, in my opinion. She would have, she would have decided to go with a new look to adapt a new lease on life, if you will, have that new outlook, outlease, if you will. But yeah, that's all I can really say on this, still, guys. But anyway, I just wanted to do, I guess, what you can call a little bit of a Sally Acorn talk, a little bit of a discussion on Sally Acorn, based on the cameo that took place in the IDW Chaotix 30th anniversary issue. But let me know what your thoughts are on everything I've had to say here. Comment down below if you didn't do so already in the live chat. Let me know what your thoughts are on everything I mentioned. And until next time, guys, do me a solid favor, like I said at the beginning, like the video, ring the bell for notifications, subscribe to the channel, share the video, and support me at all the outlets linked in the description, where you can find my content elsewhere, as well as where you can help me out otherwise as well, at places like Patreon, Venmo, Cash App, you name it. But guys, let me know again what your thoughts on what I had to say here, and until next time, I am out.